Hey everyone, James Azar here with CyberHub Engage. We are live on LinkedIn. For those tuning in, watching us now, thank you so much. I've got Jordan Goodman, the host of MoneyAnswers.com, probably one of the top radio shows in the New York area, 40-year Wall Street vet. Not enough accolades and things that can be said about Jordan when it comes to his financial know-how. I've been lucky and blessed to have him join us here today to kind of answer your questions on COVID-19, its economic impact, what's it doing, what's going to happen. We hear a lot of pundits talk, but very few people are talking about what it means to all of us. So Jordan, welcome on the show, man. Thank you so much for coming in.
Great to be with you, James. Hope we can help people with a very uncertain situation.
We are in kind of uncharted territory, right? This has we've never seen. I don't think we've ever seen the market go down the way it has been. People compare this to the 2008 and the 2000 market crash. How do you see this? I mean, in your 40 years, how's this crash different from others?
Well, it is the sharpest over the shortest period of time we've ever seen. The market hit an all-time record high. I think it was February 27th, almost exactly a month ago to today, where the NASDAQ and the Dow and the S&P all hit all-time record highs. And depending on the index, we're down 35-40% in a month, basically. And that's because this came out of the blue. People did not think this would be as bad as it has been, and that we'd have to kind of shut down the economy. So when that happens, this is a major deflationary event. Less production, less work, unemployment shooting up dramatically, and an economic contraction. Some economists have said in the first quarter we're in now, we may have a contraction at a 25% annual rate. Now, before that, we've been growing at maybe a 2% rate, to give you a sense of how much the economy is going to contract. And not only domestically, but worldwide. I mean, you've had to shut down the economies in China and India and Italy and Korea, and all these places all at the same time. So that's why it's such a severe economic contraction. Now, to offset that deflationary contraction, you have massive inflationary or reflationary efforts from central banks around the world and from governments around the world. I mean, in the United States, the Federal Reserve has added about $2 trillion to the money supply in the last month. Just unprecedented. They've got a bazooka. They're shooting everything they possibly can. In fact, this week, Fed Chairman Powell said he will do whatever it takes to keep things going. That's no limit whatsoever on the amount of money they can print. That's on the monetary side. And the fiscal side, it looks like the Congress is going to pass a roughly $2 trillion bailout bill, which will bail out all kinds of industries, airlines, cruise ships, oil companies, Boeing, I mean, you name it. Get money into people's hands, like everybody's going to get a $1,200 check and $500 per child, things like that. Small businesses, states, municipalities, everybody wants a bailout, James. So $2 billion is a start, but it's not enough.
Well, everyone wants a bailout. I still find it hard to believe that we need to bail out the oil industry. The oil industry's impact by this was the Saudis and Russians deciding to increase their output and essentially cripple the fracking industry in the U.S. Should we really be bailing out oil? I mean, that's a free market move. That has less to do with bailout and COVID-19 and probably more to do with politics and possibly a foreign policy.
But because of COVID-19, obviously people are driving less and flying less and trucking less and all that. Demand collapsed for oil. So oil, which had been $50, $55 a barrel, is now like $24 a barrel. It got as low as $17 a barrel. Collapsed, and the price came way down. Well, normally in that circumstance, the producers should produce less. But you're right, the Saudis and the Russians got into a game of chicken, I guess, and said, well, you cut production or you cut production. No, we're not going to do it. The Saudis said, all right, we'll increase production at a time of massive oversupply of oil, and that's why oil cratered. Maybe they'll come to an agreement. They really haven't yet. But when demand crashes, you normally think supply should go down a lot. They haven't done that so far.
So does that, when I got to tell you, I'm glad we have an SUV because I filled up gas for like $38 the other day. Not being grateful for, COVID-19 and the drop in gas prices, but I don't think I've filled up gas for that cheap since I was 16.
Right. It's going to go lower, okay? Because what's happening is in the United States, I mean, you can say we shouldn't bail out the oil industry. It's a major industry employing lots of people and providing energy independence to the United States. It's been a very positive thing. There's about 8 states where most of the oil is produced: Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, Alaska, North Dakota, places like that. This is going to devastate the economies, the countries, the companies, and the municipal finances. Imagine what's going to happen to Alaska's finances, okay, when oil goes to 24 instead of 55.
Well, Alaska also lives off of oil and tourism, and they can't have either of those right now.
Correct. So this is happening to municipalities around the country. Their revenues are plunging dramatically, and their costs are skyrocketing dramatically, like for unemployment insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, all kinds of other things as well. So the deficits, there's going to be major federal deficits, but state budgets are going to have huge deficits as well. And most states have a constitutional convention requirement that they have a balanced budget. How they're going to do that in this environment, who knows?
Well, this is very, very difficult because not only is this economic impact, typically when we've seen these crashes before, they're almost perfectly timed until after a major election. This is happening right before a major election in the midst of what seemed to be almost settled primary season. And so how do you think this is going to how are the markets going to react given the fact that this is an election year as well? And, this isn't really, this crisis didn't start because of bad economic policy. It started because of a healthcare emergency, once in a century.
This whole coronavirus is going to be the major issue in the election, how it's handled, well or badly. And that's still to be determined. With Trump talking about let's open the economy up at Easter, the health professionals just shudder at that possibility. That is totally insane from a health point of view. Yes, it's hurting the economy. Yes, people are getting laid off. This morning, the jobless claims, a week ago, they were about 280,000. Today, they're about 3.2 million in 1 week, new claims. And that's going to shoot up to millions and millions. So yes, it's hurting the economy badly. But to open things up again, you just know that's going to cost. Already there are new hotspots every day. New Orleans and Atlanta now are apparently getting hot. So you have to shut things down, as painful as it is, or you're going to have these rolling, hotspots all over the place. We'll never kill this thing.
Well, Atlanta's been able to kind of withstand this, being that, we live in Atlanta and Georgia. I can say that the flights, there were about 3 flights a day from Korea. When this really hit Korea, they stopped those flights. Right. Those flights haven't renewed. And our flight to Shanghai stopped almost immediately. And so, we're not as hard hit as other parts of the country. I think New York, being that it's an international hub and so many people, fly in and out of New York, that was bound to happen. And everything is so densely populated. Atlanta, on the other hand, Georgia is not as densely populated as the island of Manhattan. You're a New Yorker. You know how densely populated New York is. That's why New York is the hardest hit area in the country. It's a densely populated place.
So how this is going to play out depends on our behavior. The good news is we've seen examples, China and Korea particularly, of where they took extreme measures to close things down, and it worked. I don't think there's any new cases in China now. It peaked, and it went down, and I think they're pretty much taking it over, and I think Korea is the same thing. But extreme measures. I've seen videos of the police literally locking people into their homes when they were trying to get out, or they would arrest you if you were on the street. Things like that. We're more of a free society and not doing those kind of things. So we are not being, as much as America's closed down, we are not at all as closed down as they were in China and Korea, and that's what worked. So I don't think it's going to get over with as quickly because we're not locking it down as much as they did.
So what are some of the long-standing economic damage from COVID-19? What are some of the damages that we're really going to see for a while?
Okay, so it to some extent depends how long it lasts, okay? Let's just go through some of the damages. Obviously, the federal budget is just going to be completely blown up. Right? We just did a bill yesterday, $2 trillion. The entire federal budget is about $4 trillion. So adding debt on top of debt. We already had 23 trillion in debt, and the 2 trillion is not going to be enough. So the federal budget is completely going to be huge amounts of debt. As we mentioned, municipalities, both local and state, going to have their budgets completely blown over, completely. Small business, if they close down and they don't have the money to pay their employees, which is what's happening, they lay them off. They don't want to, but they have to. So tremendous damage to small businesses and medium and large, all the businesses, and obviously to those employees. If they go out of business, there's no switch to turn on when we come back up. It's like there's no there. They're zombies. They're dead. So we've got to have. That's why this aid is going to small business, to give them the money to keep their staff, to keep operations going, even if they're not open for business. So tremendous damage will be done to small business. Obviously, the whole healthcare system is having tremendous pressure on it. We were not ready for a pandemic like this at all. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the healthcare system and the supply chain and all those kind of things. The stock market is taking a huge hit here, and many high-quality companies are trading way, way down from where they were just a month or so ago, and smaller companies even more so, and around the world. I mean, the United States is doing relatively better than around the world, where their stock market is just getting devastated. So those are just a few areas we're going to have trouble going longer term.
When you think of you mentioned so many different industries, specifically small business, who, like you said, if they don't get the aid, they're out of business. Right. And those employees are going to stay on unemployment. And that's really going to slow the recovery, because by the time new people come in with new money, new businesses, we're talking several years. So, and one thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and maybe you can share a little bit about it, is we're not going to end this COVID-19 in May or whenever we reopen. Flu season is going to be right around the corner several months later, and it's going to come back. Right. And we're probably not going to have a vaccine by then. Right. We hope to have a little bit more capacity, but what happens to the economy if come October, November, December, flu season, this hits again?
It's going to hurt us all over again. This is what happened in 1918. In the spring of 1918, they had some breakout. It wasn't too bad, what they called the Spanish flu. And then the war, World War I, ended in November 1918. All the soldiers came back, bringing the Spanish flu with them. I mean, it started early, like October. It just exploded in the fall of 1918. I think it was something like 50 million people died or something like that. And obviously, people travel around the world a lot more today than they did in 1918. So that's exactly what happened. It started relatively small in the spring, kind of went away in the summer, and then exploded in the fall. And that could happen here again. I mean, China's closed it down. If they're already starting to reopen their factories and their stores and all that. It could come back again. It's not as though this has been killed. Lots and lots of people have the virus and are asymptomatic. They don't know they've got the virus. So they could give it to other people, particularly those with immune compromised systems or older people. So you could start this all over again, without these extreme measures.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how businesses are really going to plan for this next time around, because I feel like as this comes back, and a conversation I was having earlier today for our virtual summit on April 2nd, we were talking about election security and what is the backup plan if this pandemic is back at it again, let's say around Halloween, about a week before the presidential elections. What's your contingency for voting?
You got to print them in advance. You cannot print 150 million ballots in a week. It just isn't physically possible. You'd have to do mail-in ballots, whatever, September. I mean, it takes a long time to print these things up. So the election may be disrupted. We just canceled the Olympics. We've canceled everything else, basically.
Yeah.
I think it could definitely, even the primaries coming up. The primaries have been delayed. Maybe we'll have all mail-in primaries. But a lot of states are not set up for that. Some states are, but some states are not. So it's going to impact politics. And clearly, as far as the issue, if it's handled well, I think President Trump is going to be getting credit for that and probably get reelected. If it's handled badly, they're going to pile on him. And that's going to be the key issue most fresh in people's minds about how he's handling it.
So when we talk about a little bit about businesses, what should businesses be doing right now in this period of time to really survive this from an economic standpoint? What are some of the things you would let them
Liquidity is
to
the
do?
key, having liquidity to be able to make it through. Businesses are drawing down their credit lines to have liquidity. If you can keep your employees, it's really better, even though they're not doing anything, because it's going to be really hard to pull everybody back together again. People kind of go separate directions, and all those employees that have been trained, you just can't start up again. So if you can possibly keep your employees, that would be a good way to go. Let me give you a few sources of liquidity that people may not be aware of.
Absolutely.
One of them is you can actually take equity out of your home without a loan, without a home equity loan of any kind. It's called home equity sharing. And there's a website for that, findequityfreedom.com. And so the way it works is they look at the value of your home today, like on
Zillow or anywhere, right?
like that. And then that's your current base price. In the future, when you sell that home, whether it's a month from now or 10 years from now, they agree to share in the appreciation of the future value of the home. Okay? And in return for that, they give you cash on your home. In effect, you're liquefying the cash in your home today. Okay? So there's no loans, no interest payments. You're getting cash today. It could be several $100,000, depending on the value of your home. And with no fees or anything like that. That's something. That's probably the biggest place people have equity in their value is in the value of their homes, but they don't think they can get at it without a home equity loan, and they don't want to take on debt.
Right.
So something that's called home equity sharing. Again, findequityfreedom.com is a website that they can find out about that. So that's kind of an unusual way. I'll give you another one if that's okay, James.
Absolutely, go for it. That's what people are listening and tuning in
Just
for.
kind of what I do. I do the money answers. I give people resources that can help them out. Okay, if you have a life insurance policy that you don't need anymore or can't afford because the premiums are going up, you can sell that life insurance policy into what's called the life settlement market instead of letting it lapse. You can potentially get hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. So say you're 70 years old, maybe not you, but maybe your parents. Say you're 70 years old, okay, and you've got $1 million life insurance policy. You could sell that for maybe $400,000, $300,000, something like that. A hedge fund would buy it, and then they bought it for $300,000. Say they continue to pay the premiums, and whenever you die, whether it's 20 years from now or 10 years, whatever it is, they get the $1 million. So that's why they're willing to do that. So it's a way of liquefying something which is costing you money now, which can become liquid cash. A website for that is it's fundinglife.com. Fundinglife.com. They put buyers and sellers together of life insurance policies. They have more buyers than they have sellers. So your audience would be sellers of insurance policies. And literally, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars and not have to pay any more premiums because you just liquefied that policy. Those are two examples of some quick liquidity people might not have thought about before.
As we look at this COVID-19 pandemic and excuse me, it's not corona. That cough is not corona. I drank really cold water and that makes me cough. I have to tell people that I've been on way too many calls today and people are like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm just drinking really cold water because that's what keeps me awake. And so I can't drink lukewarm water. Can't do it. But what has this pandemic done to the thought of globalizations and its impact on the market? Are you going to see organizations start to shift away from China and go to different places? And what does that mean to the economy, to employees, to everything else?
Absolutely. A lot of companies are going to rethink globalization. I'm going to give you one example. The drug industry makes 80% of its drugs in China, and they've been holding them back. And we have like no supplies of just basic kind of drugs because they're all made in China cheaply. The drug companies don't want to be caught like that again. So yes, I think these supply chains will be brought back to North America or other places, maybe shifted to Vietnam and Bangladesh and Thailand and India, which has been happening before. But certain industries, the drug industry being one example, I think we don't want to take that risk and have it go back. I mean,
but what does that mean for healthcare costs? Right, because we produce in China because it's cheaper.
Correct. And so when it's made in the U.S., it's going to be more expensive. But I think that's a price we are not willing to pay. In the past, globalization brought tremendous prosperity to the world because it lowered prices and increased productivity. But the price of that is you don't want to get stuck in a case like this. There's been a tremendous amount of damage done to the China reputation, I guess you might say, because when this broke out in December, they were just kind of poo-pooing it. It's not that big a deal. There was this doctor who said this is going to be really big, and they shut him up, and he ultimately died. They did not handle this well. Communist and authoritarian regimes do not like bad news, basically.
No, they don't. And they're hiding really the impact of COVID-19 in China, in Russia, in Iran.
Right.
This is a cybersecurity podcast. And one of the things we've been monitoring is the cybersecurity activity of these communist authoritarian regimes.
Authoritarian.
Whatever you just said.
But you're right. I mean, they don't like bad news. So in the case of China, I don't want to hear about all this stuff in Wuhan, Well, okay, so that let it spread. By the time it exploded, it was too late.
Well, so, and they're hiding
right.
But they're hiding the real numbers. And the world isn't dumb to that, meaning just because the media covers it up doesn't mean it's not there. There's a website for people listening, watching, whatever. They compare satellite, that you can go and pick the Wuhan province and look at satellite images on November 1st and February 1st. And take that and cross it with Google Maps, and the only places that have smoke billowing out of them are their crematories. And there's no reason for your crematories to be operating 24 hours a day, billowing smoke at record pace, unless you're covering something up. And so we already know that the figures coming out of China, that the media is like saying Spain and Italy are bypassing Chinese numbers. I take that at not even face value, because I just don't believe the figures. I don't believe anything that comes out of China. And you're right. I think more and more companies are going to distrust China.
Right.
Why aren't companies looking to go to Mexico? From an economic reason, doesn't that make more sense? I mean, go to the southern of our border. It's closer. It's easier.
You've got those maquiladoras all across the border. So you have had a lot of U.S. companies go there. But every time they do that, Trump gives them a hard time. So, we do have a new NAFTA, what they call the USMCA, which means it's better for both sides to do trade. But I think some will go to Mexico, but a lot of it's going to come back here. Executives across the world are reconsidering globalization.
So as you kind of look at the stock market today, just notice while you and I are chatting here, is it peaked again? The market rose again. Is the market now rising because of the impending Senate bill, the $2 trillion bailout, which is the largest bailout on planet Earth? I mean, and there's 4 trillion others that the Federal Reserve is saying the paper they're going to buy.
Right. That is the reason the market's been coming back, is the hope that this stimulus will work. Now, in the best of all circumstances, this money gets out quickly. It'll last 2 months, 3 months, maybe, something like that. If the virus is still going and the economy is still shut down after that time, you're going to have to either do another stimulus program, or a lot of businesses are going to go under. I mean, the individual who gets $1,200 and $500 per kid, that's nice, but it's not going to pay the rent and the food and all your basic expenses for most people. So it's not going to get them through to July or something like that, So I think they're being a little bit too optimistic that this is going to solve everything. On the monetary side, what the Federal Reserve is, by injecting all this liquidity, is to allow the banks to keep lending, basically. I mean, people have these lines of credit, both individuals and businesses, and they're drawing these lines down to get liquidity. The banks would run out of money if they didn't get money from the Fed to feed all those lines of credit. And the same in the financial markets. The bond market, there's been a lot of illiquidity. Even money market funds, they rely on what's called commercial paper, overnight paper. And the commercial paper market is crucial to funding companies. And that was freezing up as well, which is exactly what happened in 2008. So a lot of that Fed liquidity is going into the commercial paper market to keep that moving again. So for the moment, it's working. But they're going to have to keep pouring money. And ultimately, you'd think this would be inflationary. Pouring huge amounts of money out of thin air, both on the fiscal and monetary side. but it's working against this massive deflationary force.
But I mean, from a global standpoint, though, don't we stand to benefit from this a little bit more? I mean, every currency in the world is depreciating. Right. Every stock market is down significantly. So, I mean, won't our inflation, won't it be relative to global? I mean, this isn't 2008 where, we were in a world of hurt. Europe was in a world of hurt, but China and Japan were spooling up and were taking advantage of it.
No, I mean, relative to the rest of the world, the U.S. is in a better position. We went into this much stronger. Our banks are much stronger. Our companies are much stronger. But this has taken a real hit to all these strong companies in a very short period of time. So, they always say we're the horse that you shoot, but then we're the last horse shot, I guess you might say. But it's taking a real toll on the U.S. economy. And then there's a whole psychological impact, too. People are very fearful. You don't just snap back from this instantly. I mean, even in 2008, it really took about 10 years to recover from that, if you think of it. The stock market went up first, but for employment to get back and all that, it took a long time to recover from that. It was such a sharp, and this in a certain way is sharper and totally unexpected. I mean, when, for example, Bear Stearns went under in March of 2008, it was a long time before Lehman Brothers went down in September 2008. You had some warning that a storm was gathering. This hit out of the blue, and in 1 month could have wiped everything out and shut the entire economy down.
Well, I mean, theoretically speaking, when you look, a lot of people want to compare this to the crash of 2008, but they're very different. The crash of 2008 was man-made. It was people over leveraging, buying crap paper and marking it as really good paper. But this here is strong economy, strong employment numbers, and if we save small business, then we should have something to come back to. There's also a silver lining to this, which is a lot of the companies that are today part of this economy, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, and so forth, they were all post 2008. Are we going to see a spike in probably telehealth? Is this going to be the solution to our healthcare issue in America? Could this be the crisis that spurts healthcare and our healthcare industry for years to come?
Not only healthcare, but all kinds of other things. I mean, it's interesting. Companies are noticing we're able to work pretty well from home.
Right.
Stock market, okay? The New York Stock Exchange floor is closed. Trading seems to be going on just fine with nobody on the floor. The people in the New York Stock Exchange may say, we really need a floor to do this trading when it worked perfectly without anybody on the floor.
Another Trump Tower in New York coming soon.
But, I mean, and companies are going to say, maybe we don't need all that office space before, and we can work remotely. Telehealth is a certain example. All kinds of things that in the past we didn't think were possible, kind of an old model where you've got to get together in one place in an office. All those assumptions are going to be changed.
So we've got a few questions. I want to get to some of those questions. So first one was submitted through email from one of our listeners. Her name is Sandra, and she's asking about the market volatility and how long do you think it will take for people to regain their investments that they've had in the financial markets?
Well, again, it depends to some extent on how the virus goes. But let's take a best case scenario, James, if we can. Let's say we've pretty much peaked and getting back to it in June or something like that. I think that's
right.
Let's say that. The stock market anticipates, it doesn't actually have to happen. It anticipates it before it happens. So what the stock market is looking for is a slower rate of increase in COVID cases. Right now, we're still on the kind of accelerating. But once the rate of acceleration slows and it starts coming down, that's when the market takes off. Okay, they don't actually need to have happened yet. I mean, like in 2008, the market went down before the things crashed, and it bottomed in March 2009 before things recovered and start going back up. So the market always anticipates what happens, even though you don't see any evidence of it yet. So I think that's what happens. So it really is going to be stupid to sell your holdings at these low prices now. Every time there's been some kind of a financial crunch, 2008, 9/11, dot-com crash of 2000, crash of 87, go all the way back. Every time if you sold at the bottom because you were so fearful, you went back and said, what was I thinking? Why was I selling at the lowest possible prices? And it's going to be the same thing here right now. You have to be able to withstand the pain. but everybody's looking for an excuse to kind of get in because the prices are great on high quality stocks these days.
So another question is, it's coming from Jackie Caffey. She's on our LinkedIn channel. And so she's asking, how much do you think it would cost the feds to actually get everyone tested so we can project the bend in the curve and project businesses getting back to normal?
We have to produce the test kits. We don't even have them. So
well, we don't have enough, right? We don't have enough.
Close. Nothing even close. There have been some specific examples. Like there was a small town in Italy, I think it was called VO, something like that, with like 300 people. And just as an experiment, they tested everybody in the town. And roughly 50% of the people had the virus, but only 10% of them were symptomatic. So 40% of the people had the virus and nobody knew it, and they didn't show any symptoms. If you actually tested the entire United States today, 330 million, however many we've got, probably 40 to 50% of people would have it, something like that. So we don't have close to enough tests for 330 million. But obviously it would cost billions of dollars, but it would be worth it. So at least we knew what was going on.
So one more question that's come through our mailbag is from Patrick. And Patrick is asking, in relative to employees that have stock options in their companies that could be possibly now laid off or losing their jobs and possibly not being able to regain them post this crisis because the job could be now deemed obsolete because guess what? We work so much better from home, as you said earlier. And so Patrick is asking, is part of the bailout going to cover people who might lose their stock options, or should that have been a discussion if it's not?
That's not the way Congress thinks about stock options. That would be considered, those rich folks. We can't bail out the rich folks, even though these are average employees who have stock options.
Right. That's an average employee's almost secondary retirement fund, right? That's how you pay off your house. That's how you pay off your credit cards and your cars. You exercise your stock options. You pay your taxes on them. The government makes its money, and then they're able to go and really, invest in buying an additional home or paying off their mortgage or paying off their credit cards and their cars.
The stock options were deep in the money, and now they're deep out of the money, basically, because
right.
The price of stocks went down. So no, I would not expect the government to bail out your stock options. I mean, in fact, in giving these bailouts to these industries, one of the things they're saying is you cannot give executive bonuses, you cannot buy back stock. They may limit the dividends they can pay. This is what they did before with the banks a little bit. They had the TARP program. But this time you're going to bail out the airlines, cruise ships, casinos, the oil industry. It's going to be endless. The restaurant industry says they need about $450 billion alone.
Yeah. I don't believe a thing that comes out of the restaurant industry's mouth. I think there's a way that politicians operate, and I don't know, maybe as someone who's a financial conservative, and the fact that I don't want government all up in my business and bailing people. The restaurant industry does not need $450 billion. A predominant amounts of restaurants, especially the big chains, are working on curbside pickup and takeaway. Uber Eats is delivering. I just got an ad 2 days ago from Uber Eats saying, sign up to be an Uber Eats driver because they need people, because people are ordering food. Because guess what? Americans are lazy. They don't want to cook. They stocked up on toilet paper and bottled water for whatever godforsaken reason they've stocked up on. If you're from New York and you stocked up on bottled water, I get it. We're in Georgia. No reason. You can drink water out of the faucet here and be just fine. It's probably better than bottled water. Mind-boggling, this whole thing. So I don't see why restaurants. Explain to me, Jordan, because I don't get it. Why do restaurants need money?
Well, right now they have no customers. They're going to lay off all their employees. I think they have over 5 million workers between the cooks and the servers and everything.
If you're open and delivering food, your cooks are still working. Yeah. Your wait staff is probably still packing the order. So you may not need your entire wait staff, but waiters don't cost you $10,000 a month. You pay waiters $2 an hour. By all given math, that's a few $100s a month. So again, I'm trying to $450 billion. I just think that's going to union bosses, and I don't know where else. I don't know. By the time that money gets to the poor waiter that you're talking about that's being laid off, what is he getting? $400? He's going on unemployment anyways. He'll get more there.
Right. So I'm just saying every industry is going to ask for bailouts. That's just one example. It's very visible because in every town there are restaurants and there are waiters and all that. And the Congress is not going to be able to bail everybody out. So I think a lot of restaurants are going to go out of business and not be able to come back. They don't have access to credit lines. I'll tell you another area, landlords. I mean, I'm a little bit worried about them. People are not going to be paying their rent, and that's going to hurt the landlords who have to pay their mortgage, right? So,
but that's where I feel like the money should be going to. The money should be going to float the people who hold the liens on the mortgages, and every bank that takes the bailout money should give everyone a 2 to 3 month pass on rent, and the landlords should also pass that off to their tenants, and at least you reduce probably what is, and sometimes 30 to 40 to 50% of the business expense, which is, the rent.
Right. So we'll see. That's going to be another area of stress. I know a guy who has a 4-story apartment that he rents out, and 2 of his 4 are not paying their rent. He said, yeah, that's nice, but I got to pay my mortgage, and there's a limitation on foreclosures and evictions, all that kind of thing. I mean, all areas of the economy are going to be affected, and one thing affects another. So if people don't pay their rent, it affects the landlord, it affects the mortgage company, all the services. It's all tied together, and that's what's going to happen here.
Right, but and that's the interesting part of this bailout debate, which is why I think government bailing out business is just dumb. I think this is one of those where I feel like, again, I'm a conservative when it comes to financials. Like I don't want. I think I pay too much taxes. I think government is way too up in my business. Like that's why I live in Georgia. At least here, government lets us be. Very much less regulation, tax rate almost non-existent, and the local government here does a ton to support businesses and ensure that they've got a good business climate. But looking at this situation right now, this money, this $2 trillion is it's not really supporting maybe the people that needs to be supported, which is the banks and the mortgage companies and who drive this, or the logistics companies and the trucking companies who are delivering now different equipment or equipment producers who may not be able to get paid for 90 to 100 to 20 to 150 days, because those are the people who need to be floated, because they're the ones that are keeping the jobs that are going to hire people to grow. Amazon is hiring 100,000 people when everyone's laying people off.
I heard 300,000 actually.
300,000 people, Amazon. Yeah. Jeff Bezos, very bad man. Very bad man. Very, very bad. 300,000 jobs.
Yeah. This is a massive intrusion in the economy by the government around the world. When there's trouble, you run to Uncle Sam to bail you out, is what it comes down to.
Well, government should pay for it because they shut it down, right?
Well, true.
They've ordered to shut it down, but they should also be responsible with the taxpayer money and the death of the taxpayers with who they give this money to. Because I feel like a lot of businesses are still ticking, but a lot of businesses are still unsure when we're going to get out of it, and that's why spending is down. I think once people see the light at the end of the tunnel, spending is going to go back up and things will start to pick up again.
But slowly. It's not going to be this fast snapback that people are talking about. People are going to be very cautious. There's psychological damage being done here by being laid off quickly, and now that more than 50% of America live paycheck to paycheck, and they're not getting that paycheck now. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of desperate people out there.
Jordan, I want to say thank you so much for coming on this LinkedIn Live with us. We've gotten a few more questions and so forth, and we'll answer those kind of offline in respect to time.
From your folks, by the way, my website's moneyanswers.com, and I got all kinds of resources to help people. I'm glad to answer their questions directly.
You also have a radio show in New York, correct? And a podcast, or is it just
It's called the Money Answers Show. It's called the Voice America Business Network, and it's live on Mondays from 3 to 4, but it's archived. So at moneyanswers.com, you can see all the past shows about every topic. I've been doing it every week since 2007, so there's over 700 shows on there.
Well, congratulations, Jordan. Thank you so much, folks. Jordan Goodman, themoneyanswers.com. And you can go check it out there, interact with him. He's also tagged in our post here on LinkedIn, so you can connect with him there as well and shoot over your questions. Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you for your questions, Sandra, Patrick, and Jackie. And we'll be back with more lives next week on Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. Until tomorrow, folks, this is James Azar signing off.